Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Amish apple fritter bread. That's right, if the Amish bake it, I want to make it. Especially when it has anything to do with apples. And especially when it has anything to do with their famous apple fritters. And like almost all the other Amish recipes I know, this quick bread is as easy and fast as it is amazing. And to get started, before we prep our apples, we will generously butter a bread dish or pan. And then to hedge our beds, I like to line it with some parchment paper, just to make removal maybe a little bit easier. But you're probably still okay without it. And then once that's set, we'll go ahead and cut up 2 large apples, which would normally start with a peeling and coring. But we're not going to do either. Okay, what we'll do is make 3 nice thick slices on one side, which is going to take us pretty much all the way to the core and the seeds. And after those first set of cuts, we'll lay it down on the flat side, and we'll make 2 cuts this time. And then we'll turn it and make 2 more. And then for our last set, we'll make 2 or 3 cuts, depending on how much apple we have to work with, at which point we should be left with just the core. And then what we'll do is stack up a few of these slices at a time, and we'll cut them into about 1/4 inch wide strips. And then, as you well know, if you turn strips and slice across at the same distance apart, you should end up with some nice small uniform cubes. And by the way, just sort of uniform is fine. And not only does not peeling the apples make this faster and easier, I think it actually improves the final product. As the color's better, we get more flavor, and of course, thanks to all that extra fiber, it is definitely nutritionally superior. And if you're using Honeycrisp apples, which is what I'm using, you will have 0 textural problems by including those skins, since I promise you they will just disappear. And that's it. Once our apple's been prepped and transferred into a bowl, we will spice this up with some cinnamon, as well as some ground ginger, and then we'll follow that with a generous amount of brown sugar. And then what we'll do is take a spatula and give this a thorough mixing, at which point we're going to let this sit for about 10 to 15 minutes to macerate. No, I said macerate, which is where we toss our fruit with sugar to draw out all those sweet, natural, beautiful juices. So once that's mixed, we'll set it aside, and we will move on to prep our dry ingredients, which are nothing more than some all-purpose flour, to which we will add some salt, as well as some baking soda. No, not baking powder, baking soda. And we'll simply take a whisk and give that a mix until everything's evenly combined. And once that's set, let's go back and toss our apples again. And as you can see, that sugar's already started working, and everything's getting nice and syrupy, which is exactly what we want. So that is already looking very nice. And we'll let that go for another 5 minutes or so while we mix up our wet ingredients. And that's going to start with some white sugar, which, yes, in the world of baking and pastry is considered a wet ingredient. And to that we'll add 1 large egg. We'll also do a nice splash of real pure vanilla extract, as well as a neutral flavored vegetable oil. And then we'll finish up with some sour cream before we take a whisk and mix this enthusiastically for about a minute. And I should mention, some recipes call for yogurt instead of sour cream, which totally works flavor-wise. But yogurt doesn't have as much fat as sour cream, so you are going to get something that's not quite as rich. But anyway, you decide. I mean, you are, after all, the kitchen fairy, of which dairy. But anyway, once that's mixed, we will grab our apples, and we'll transfer in about 75% of the mixture. And while you could dump everything in at this point, we like to save about 25% of the apples for the top, since as you'll see, that's going to help us produce a very gorgeous appearance. And then once 75% of the apples are mixed in, we'll go ahead and dump in our dry ingredients, and we will give that a brief mixing with the spatula, and we are only going to do this until that flour just barely disappears, at which point we're going to stop immediately so as not to overmix, and we're going to transfer that batter into our prepared loaf dish. And once everything's been scraped out of the bowl with a spatula, we will take a nice big spoon to clean that off, and then with that exact same spoon, we will take the reserved 25% of our apple mixture, and we will spoon that evenly over the top, which admittedly, I'm doing much more slowly and carefully than I need to. But I'm in no hurry, and I find these types of steps very therapeutic and relaxing. And then once our batter's been appled and served, I'm going to place down a towel, since I'm using a glass dish, and I'm going to give this the old tappa, just to knock out any air pockets and settle everything down before this gets baked. And that's it. This is now ready to transfer into the upper center of a 350-degree oven for about 50 to 60 minutes, or until it looks like this. Oh yes, that looks done. But let's go ahead and test it with a bamboo skewer. And if it comes out clean, you've baked it long enough. But if it comes out with raw batter on it, you'll have to bake it for a few more minutes. And then what we'll do is let this cool for about 15 to 20 minutes before we carefully remove it and peel off the parchment. And once that's been accomplished, we'll let it cool completely on the rack. And while we're waiting, we will mix up the thing that turns Amish apple bread into Amish apple fritter bread, which is a very simple icing made with powdered sugar, a little bit of vanilla extract, plus a splash of milk. And we'll go ahead and take a whisk and mix that until smooth. And if once you're done you want your icing thicker, add some more sugar, or if you want it thinner, add some more milk. But that was looking just about perfect to me. And if everything's gone according to plan, our icing will be thick enough to hold a nice sharp line, but still runny enough to drip down the sides of the loaf, just about to the bottom. And as far as variations go, instead of the milk, you could, if you want, use lemon juice for something a little tangier, or apple cider, of course, would also work. But I'm going with my mom's classic icing recipe, which if you're my age, was probably your mom's classic icing recipe. And that's it. Once iced, this is technically ready to serve, although I almost always will chill this before serving it, since I think the taste and texture are better. But I'm sorry, I just couldn't wait. So I grabbed a knife and very carefully sliced off a piece, and I'll get to the taste in a moment. But that, my friends, is one of the most beautiful quick breads you will ever see, which, by the way, those apple skins helped achieve. But as I promised, they basically disappeared, and no one will know they're there, probably. And then while the texture is obviously going to be a little bit different, the taste of this is very, very apple fritter-like. And by the way, if you've never had Amish apple fritter donuts, definitely make those first before you make this, since those are like one of the best things to eat ever. But this does give us a very similar experience, with probably a little less effort and no messy pan frying. And while I think this would be perfect served any time of the year, if you have people over for the holidays, I could not think of a better choice than this. In fact, you should bake up a couple loaves on Christmas Eve, which will make your house smell better than any candle ever invented, and then serve with coffee the next day. You will have an absolutely perfect Christmas breakfast. And if you're a fan of Amish baking, or apples, or apple fritters, or fast and easy quick breads, or all of those things, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.